The laughter hit me before I could breathe. It started as a ripple, a few nervous chuckles from people who didn't know where to look. Then it spread. One laugh became 3, 3 became 10. And suddenly, I was standing in the middle of that glittering ballroom, wearing a red dress I had chosen to feel powerful, while my husband's voice echoed off the walls like a verdict. She thinks her little jewelry hobby is going to make her famous. My skin burned. Not from embarrassment, from something deeper. Something that had been building for years. I could feel every eye in that room. The women in their cocktail dresses, holding champagne flutes frozen halfway to their lips, the men in tailored suits, exchanging glances that said, "Glad that's not my wife." The Christmas tree behind me twinkled like it was mocking the scene. Pine and gingerbread filled the air, and I remember thinking how strange it was that a room could smell so warm while feeling so cold. Richard wasn't done. He grabbed my elbow, pulling me closer to the circle like I was a prop in his comedy routine. His breath smelled like whiskey and ambition. "And now she's dating the boss too, right?" "Matt?" He winked at Matthew Sanders, his own department head, standing 3 feet away, with a face turning to stone. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Dating the boss. If only Richard knew. If only he understood that the man he just dragged into his cruel joke was the same man who had believed in me when Richard stopped, the same man who had quietly invested in my little hobby 6 months ago, the same man whose signature sat next to mine on a contract that was worth more than Richard's annual salary. But he didn't know. And standing there, with laughter dying into awkward silence, with my husband's smirk cutting into me like glass, I made a decision. I was done being small. I was done shrinking so he could feel tall. And I was absolutely done letting him write my story. But before I tell you how I made Richard regret every single word that came out of his mouth that night, before I show you how his own cruelty became the gasoline that burned his world down, let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about a woman who built a castle while everyone told her she was playing with blocks. It's about a mother who worked until midnight so her daughter could wake up proud. It's about a wife who loved a man who forgot how to love her back. And it's about the moment I stopped asking for permission to be powerful. My husband thought he was exposing me that night. He had no idea he was exposing himself. Now, before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who roots for the underdog, who believes that the quietest people in the room are often building the loudest comebacks, do me a favor. Just tap that subscribe button. That's it. One tap. Because this story is about to get good, and I don't want you to miss a single satisfying moment. Go ahead. I'll wait. Subscribed? Good. Let's keep going. I need you to understand something. Richard wasn't always cruel. When I met him, he was the kind of man who made you believe in yourself just by the way he looked at you, like you were already everything you hoped to become. It was a Saturday afternoon at a community arts fair downtown. I had rented a folding table for $40, money I didn't really have, and spread out my jewelry on black velvet cloth. Handmade pieces. Sterling silver twisted into shapes that came to me in dreams. Stones I had sourced from estate sales and tiny shops no one knew about. I was 26 years old, terrified, and convinced that no one would stop. Then Richard stopped. He didn't browse the way most people did, that polite shuffle where they touch one piece, smile tightly, and move on. No. He stood there. Really stood there. Picked up a necklace I had made the week before, a silver pendant with a raw amethyst caught in the wire like it was floating. "You made this?" he asked. "Yes. It's incredible." He looked at me then, and I swear his eyes held something like wonder. "You're going to be famous one day. I can tell." I laughed, nervous, deflecting. "I don't know about that." "I do. He bought that necklace, paid twice what I was asking because he said the price was insulting to the work. Then he asked for my number. We were married 14 months later. Those early years felt like flying. Richard would come home from his entry-level corporate job, exhausted but still interested. He'd sit at the kitchen table while I showed him new designs. He'd ask questions, real questions. What inspired that shape? Where did you find that stone? Have you thought about selling online? He believed in me so loudly that I started believing in myself. But here's what no one tells you about love. It can curdle. Slowly. So slowly, you don't notice until one day you're standing in a kitchen that used to feel warm, listening to a man who used to be your biggest fan say words that slice you open. It's cute, Michelle, but it's not real life. The first time he said it, I thought I misheard him. We had just finished dinner. Emily was 2 years old, asleep in her crib down the hall. I was excited. I had landed my first wholesale order. A boutique in the arts district wanted to carry 12 pieces. 12 pieces! It wasn't retirement money, but it was proof. Proof that strangers believed my work was worth something. I told Richard, practically bouncing on my heels. He barely looked up from his laptop. That's nice, babe. Nice? I sat down across from him. Richard, this is huge. A real store wants to sell my jewelry. He sighed. Not an annoyed sigh, worse. A patient sigh, the kind you give a child who doesn't understand how the world works. Look, I'm happy for you. Really. But you need to be realistic. It's cute, what you do. It's a nice hobby. But it's not real life. Real life is paying the mortgage. Real life is health insurance. Real life is me working 60 hours a week so we can have a future. He said it like he was being kind, like he was protecting me from disappointment. But what I heard was, your dreams are small. Your work doesn't matter. I matter. I'm the real one. I should have said something. I should have told him that his dismissal felt like a door slamming in my face. But I didn't. I just nodded, cleared the dishes, and cried quietly in the bathroom while the shower ran so he wouldn't hear. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. The thing about being dismissed is this. You either believe it or you prove it wrong. For a while, I believed it. I told myself Richard was right. He was practical. He understood money. He was trying to help me avoid heartbreak. I put my jewelry supplies in a closet and focused on being a good wife, a good mother, a good supporter of his career. But dreams don't die just because you bury them. They wait. They whisper. They find you at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and everyone is asleep. Emily was 4 when I started again. It began small. A sketch on the back of a grocery receipt while she napped, an idea that wouldn't leave me alone, a collection inspired by the ocean, by the way light moves through water. I found myself pulling out my old tools late at night, after Emily was in bed and Richard was snoring in front of the television. I worked in silence. Not the peaceful kind, the careful kind. The kind where you're afraid of being caught. I kept my supplies in a box under the bed. I watched YouTube tutorials on marketing, with the volume so low I had to read lips. I taught myself social media, email lists, photography, all of it stolen in fragments, an hour here, 30 minutes there. Richard never noticed. He came home tired, ate dinner, watched TV, went to bed. He had stopped asking about my day years ago. I had become furniture, necessary, functional, invisible. But Emily noticed. One night, I was at the kitchen table after midnight, finishing a bracelet under a single lamp. I thought she was asleep. Then I heard the soft padding of her feet. Mommy? I jumped, nearly knocking over my pliers. Baby, what are you doing up? She rubbed her eyes, her pink pajamas wrinkled from sleep. I heard noises. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Go back to bed. But she didn't. She climbed into my lap instead, her small body warm against mine. She looked at the table at the silver wire, the tiny beads, the half-finished bracelet catching the light. Mommy, are you building a castle? Something cracked open in my chest. I pulled her closer, pressing my lips to her hair. She smelled like baby shampoo and innocence. Yes, baby, I whispered. I'm building a castle. For me? For both of us. She fell asleep in my arms a few minutes later. I carried her back to bed, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. Then I went back to the kitchen table and worked until dawn. That became my routine. Days belonged to Emily and the house and the performance of being Richard's wife. Nights belonged to me. I was exhausted in a way that lived in my bones. But I was also alive in a way I hadn't been in years. By the time Emily turned 5, I had built something real. An online shop, a small but loyal following, orders coming in every week. Nothing life-changing yet, but proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that my hobby had customers who valued it. I never told Richard. He didn't deserve to know. The night I met Matthew Sanders, I almost didn't go out. It was a networking event for local entrepreneurs, the kind of thing I used to dream about attending. A colleague from an online business group had invited me. "You need to get your face out there," she said. "People buy from people they've met." I had Emily in bed, dinner cleaned up, Richard settled in front of a basketball game. He didn't ask where I was going. I said I was meeting a friend for coffee. He grunted. The event was in a hotel conference room downtown. Linen tablecloths, name tags, that specific anxiety of walking into a room where you don't know anyone. I clutched my business cards like they were a life raft and tried not to look as terrified as I felt. I was standing near the refreshments, pretending to be very interested in a fruit platter, when someone spoke beside me. "Those strawberries look like they're contemplating their existence." I turned. A man in his 50s, maybe early 60s. Gray at the temples, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was smiling, not a salesman's smile, but something genuine. "I think they've accepted their fate," I said. He laughed, extended his hand. "Matthew Sanders." Michelle Taylor. We talked. He asked about my work, and unlike most people at these events who ask about your work while scanning the room for someone more important, he actually listened. He looked at photos on my phone. He asked about my process, my inspiration, my goals. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "Taylor, any relation to Richard Taylor at Meridian Corp?" My heart stuttered. "He's my husband." Matthew's expression shifted just for a second. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition? Understanding? "I'm his department head," he said. The room tilted. Of all the people in this city, of all the networking events happening tonight, I had somehow ended up telling Richard's boss about my secret jewelry business. The one Richard didn't know had grown. The one he called cute. I wanted to disappear, but Matthew just smiled. Not a pitying smile, a knowing one. "Some people," he said slowly, "never see the talent in those they know best. That's not your limitation. It's theirs." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. "I invest in small businesses," he said, "especially ones I believe in. Take my card, think about it, no pressure." I took it. My hands were shaking slightly. "And Michelle?" He held my gaze. "Don't let anyone tell you your work isn't real. What you're building, it's as real as anything I've seen." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a long time, staring at that card, feeling something dangerous rising in my chest. Hope. I didn't call Matthew for 3 weeks. The card sat in my jewelry box, hidden under a tangle of necklaces like a secret I wasn't ready to face. Every night, I'd look at it. Every night, I'd tell myself it was too risky. Richard's boss? That was insane. That was asking for disaster. But the longer I waited, the louder the whisper got. What if? What if he's serious? What if this is the door you've been waiting for? I called him on a Tuesday afternoon while Emily was at preschool and Richard was at work. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Michelle." He sounded pleased. "I was hoping you'd call." We met for coffee, then lunch, then another coffee. He asked questions, hard questions, about my business plan, my growth strategy, my numbers. I answered everything honestly, including the parts I was ashamed of, that I worked in secret, that my husband didn't support me, that I was terrified of failing. Matthew listened to all of it. "I want to invest," he said finally. "Not because I feel sorry for you, I don't. I want to invest because I think you have something special, and I think with the right support, you could build something remarkable." The terms were fair. More than fair. He wanted no control over creative decisions. He would provide capital and business mentorship. In return, he'd receive a percentage of profits. Everything clean, everything professional. We signed the contract in his office, after hours, when the building was empty. "One thing," he said as I put my pen down. "I assume you're not telling Richard." "No." The word came out harder than I expected. Matthew nodded slowly. "That's your decision. But if he finds out, he won't. And if he does?" I looked down at the contract. My signature next to Matthew's. 2 names bound together by belief and business, and something Richard would never understand. If he does, I said, then I guess he'll finally see what he's been too blind to notice. Matthew smiled. Something in his eyes looked almost proud. Over the next 6 months, everything changed. Matthew's investment let me upgrade my supplies, buy better stones, hire a professional photographer for my product shots, build a real website instead of the DIY version held together with hope and YouTube tutorials. My following grew. Then it grew faster. Then it grew in ways that scared me. Thousands of people sharing my work, placing orders, leaving reviews that made me cry in the bathroom at 2 a.m. because I couldn't believe strangers loved what I made. All of it happened in secret. Every package I shipped, I did it while Richard was at work. Every email I answered, I did it while he watched television 3 rooms away. Every night I spent building, he slept beside me with no idea that his wife was becoming someone new. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard worked under Matthew. Richard respected Matthew. Richard talked about Matthew like he was some kind of corporate god, brilliant, connected, powerful. And Matthew? Matthew was betting on me. Richard's boss believed in his wife more than Richard ever had. I thought about that sometimes, late at night, when the house was dark and quiet. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to Richard breathe, and I'd feel something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. Clarity. I was married to a man who couldn't see me, who had stopped seeing me years ago, who had replaced love with tolerance and support with condescension. But Matthew saw me. Strangers on the internet saw me. Even Emily saw me, my 5-year-old daughter who thought I was building a castle. The only person who didn't see me was the one who was supposed to see me most. And soon, very soon, he would be forced to. I just didn't know how soon would be. I didn't know that in 3 weeks, I'd be standing in a ballroom wearing a red dress, watching my husband try to destroy me in front of everyone he worked with. And I definitely didn't know that the man he chose to drag into his humiliation would be the same man whose name sat next to mine on a contract worth more than Richard's pride. But that's the thing about underestimating someone. You never see the consequences coming. The morning of the party, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Richard was already gone early meeting, he'd said. The house was quiet except for the soft sounds of Emily watching cartoons in the living room. I lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, running through the evening ahead like a script I had to memorize. Smile. Laugh at the right moments. Don't talk too much about yourself. Don't talk too little. Be charming but not attention-seeking. Be present but not overwhelming. Be the wife Richard wanted people to see. God! I was tired. I got up, made Emily breakfast, and tried to push the anxiety down. But it kept rising, like water finding cracks in a dam. Something felt wrong. Not wrong like I'd forgotten something. Wrong like my body knew what was coming before my mind did. By late afternoon, I was standing in front of my closet, staring at the red dress. I had bought it 3 months ago on impulse. It was bolder than anything I usually wore, deep crimson, fitted, with a neckline that made me feel like someone else, someone who didn't apologize for existing. Someone who walked into rooms like she belonged there. I hadn't worn it yet. It felt too much. Too loud. But today, something made me reach for it. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was armor. Maybe I just needed to feel like the woman I was becoming instead of the woman Richard thought I still was. I slipped it on. Zipped the back. Turned to face the mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark skin glowing under the soft bedroom light, red lipstick like a declaration, eyes that held something new, something Richard hadn't put there. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Then Emily appeared in the doorway. "Mommy, you look like a princess." I smiled, kneeling down to her level. "You think so?" She nodded solemnly. But her little forehead was creased, her eyes searching my face like she was looking for something she couldn't name. "Mommy? Yes, baby? Be careful." The words hit me like a hand against my chest. Be careful. My 5-year-old daughter, who should be thinking about cartoons and cookies and whether her stuffed animals are having adventures while she sleeps, was telling me to be careful. Like she knew. Like children always know, somehow, when the people they love are walking into storms. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. "I'll be fine, sweetheart." She didn't say anything. Just held on. The babysitter arrived at 5. I kissed Emily goodbye, gave her one more squeeze, and walked out the front door with my heels clicking against the pavement and my heart beating too fast. The drive downtown felt longer than it should have. I kept the radio low, Christmas songs I couldn't focus on. My fingers tapped the steering wheel. At every red light, I checked myself in the rearview mirror, practiced a smile, adjusted my expression, tried to look like a woman who wasn't dreading every minute of the next 4 hours. You've done this before, I told myself. You've been the good wife at 100 events. This is just one more. But it didn't feel like one more. It felt like something waiting to break. I pulled into the parking garage beneath the high-rise where Richard's company was hosting the party. Killed the engine. Sat there for a full minute, hands still on the wheel. Outside the windshield, snowflakes drifted down like confetti for a celebration I wasn't part of. I took a breath. Then another. Then I stepped out into the cold and walked toward the elevators, my red dress the only bright thing in that gray concrete space. The ballroom was beautiful. I'll give them that. The moment the elevator doors opened onto the top floor, I was hit by the kind of Christmas that only corporate money can buy. A tree that must have been 15 feet tall, dripping with silver ornaments and white lights. Garlands wrapped around marble columns. The smell of pine and gingerbread mixing with expensive perfume and champagne. Soft music played something classical with bells, the kind of soundtrack designed to make people feel elegant and important. I stepped into the room and immediately felt like a fraud. Everyone looked so together. Women in designer dresses laughing with practiced ease. Men in suits that cost more than my first car, discussing golf and stocks and whatever else men like that discuss. They all belonged to each other. They spoke the same language. They knew the rules. I had learned the rules. But I had never believed them. I scanned the room for Richard. He'd told me to meet him by the bar, but the bar was crowded, and I didn't see his face anywhere. My chest tightened. Being alone in a room like this felt like wearing a sign that said, "She doesn't fit in here." Then a voice at my elbow. "You look like you could use this." I turned. A woman about my age, maybe a little older, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to me. "I'm Angela," she said. "Angela Dawson. I work with Richard in marketing. Michelle." I took the glass, grateful. "Richard's wife." "I know." Her smile stayed, but something flickered in her eyes. Sympathy. Maybe. Or pity. "He talks about you." I wondered what he said. I wondered if she'd heard him call my work cute. I wondered if everyone in this room had already decided who I was before I walked through the door. "Come on," Angela said, tilting her head toward a group near the hors d'oeuvres. "I'll introduce you to some people who won't bore you to death with quarterly projections." I followed her, clutching my champagne like a life preserver. For a while, it was fine. Angela was kind. She steered conversation toward easy topics, holiday plans, favorite restaurants, a recent movie everyone had seen. She made sure I was included without making it obvious. She had the gift of making small talk feel almost meaningful. But the whole time, I was watching the room. Where was Richard? He knew I was coming. He knew the time. He was the one who had insisted I dress up, insisted I show my face, insisted I play the role of supportive wife at his company's biggest event of the year. And now, he was nowhere. 20 minutes passed. 30. My champagne was half empty. My smile was starting to ache. Then I saw him. He was across the room, near the tall windows that looked out over the glittering city lights. He was laughing with a group of men, other managers, probably. His tie was slightly loose. His cheeks were flushed in a way that told me he'd already had a few drinks. He hadn't even looked for me. I watched him for a long moment. Watched him throw his head back, laughing at someone's joke. Watched him clap a colleague on the shoulder. Watched him be charming, charismatic, everything he no longer bothered to be at home. And something cold settled into my stomach. He didn't want me here as a partner. He wanted me here as proof. Proof that he had a wife. A pretty one. One who knew how to dress up and stand in the corner and make him look good. I was a prop. A decoration. The realization should have hurt. but standing there in my red dress, watching my husband perform for everyone except me, I felt something else. Clarity. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were all there, the extra drinks, the loud laughter, the way his eyes had that reckless glint they got when he wanted to feel powerful. But I didn't see it. Or maybe I did, and I just hoped I was wrong. I was still standing with Angela's group when Richard finally noticed me. His eyes found mine across the room, and something in his expression shifted. Not warmth, not relief, something darker. He started walking toward me. Not walking, striding. With purpose. With an audience in mind. There she is. His voice was too loud. People turned. Before I could react, he was at my side, his hand clamping around my elbow like a vice. He steered me toward the center of the room, toward a larger group of colleagues who had been chatting near the Christmas tree. "Everyone," Richard announced, his voice carrying over the music. "Meet my lovely wife, Michelle." People smiled. Polite, expectant. I smiled back. Automatic. "She cleans up nice, doesn't she?" Richard continued, his arms snaking around my waist in a grip that felt more like possession than affection. "You'd never know she spends most of her time gluing beads together in the kitchen." A few nervous laughs. My cheeks started to burn. "Richard," I started. No, let me finish." He was grinning now, playing to the crowd. "See, Michelle here has a little jewelry business. A hobby, really. She thinks it's going to make her famous." The laughter came louder this time. Not everyone. Some people looked uncomfortable. Angela's face had gone tight, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. But enough people laughed. Enough people thought it was funny, the successful executive poking fun at his wife's silly little dreams. I stood there, frozen. My red dress suddenly felt like a target. Richard wasn't done. He turned slightly, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on someone behind me. His grin widened. "And here's the best part." He raised his voice even louder. "Matt! Hey Matt, come here." Matthew Sanders stepped into view. I hadn't seen him until that moment. He must have been standing nearby, watching. His face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. "So get this," Richard said, pulling me closer like we were all in on the same joke. "My wife here has been spending a lot of time with our fearless leader. Late night calls, secret meetings," he winked at the crowd. "Makes you wonder, right?" The implication hung in the air like poison. Dating the boss. That's what he was suggesting. In front of everyone. In front of Matthew's colleagues, his subordinates, people who respected him. He was accusing me of sleeping my way into something while simultaneously mocking that something as worthless. The cruelty was almost elegant in its construction. "Isn't that right, Matt?" Richard pressed, his voice dripping with false innocence. "You two have been getting pretty close?" Matthew's face had turned to stone. The room was silent now. No more nervous laughter. Just the soft Christmas music playing on, oblivious to the wreckage happening beneath it. I couldn't breathe. But in that airless moment, something strange happened. I looked at Richard, really looked at him, at the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man who had once told me I'd be famous one day while holding a necklace I'd made with my own hands. And I didn't see him anymore. I saw a stranger. A coward. A man so threatened by my growth that he had to tear me down in public to feel tall. And something inside me went quiet. Not broken. Not defeated. Quiet. The way a storm goes quiet before it really begins. Angela was at my side in seconds. "Michelle, it's just a joke." Her voice was soft, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "He's had too much to drink. Let's get you some air." I barely heard her. Richard was still grinning, basking in the attention, waiting for someone, anyone, to validate his performance. A few men chuckled weakly. Most people just stared, frozen in that uniquely human way of witnessing cruelty and not knowing what to do about it. Matthew hadn't moved. His eyes were fixed on Richard with something that looked like barely contained fury. "Well?" Richard's voice cut through the silence. He was looking at Matthew now, challenging him. "Nothing to say, boss?" Matthew's jaw tightened. "I think you've said enough, Richard." "Oh, come on, lighten up." Richard laughed, but it was brittle now. He could feel the room turning. "Can't a guy joke about his own wife?" He turned back to me, and his expression shifted softer, but not kind. Condescending. The way you'd look at a child who doesn't understand why they're being corrected. "You know what, babe? Maybe I should drive you home early." He reached for my arm again. "Wouldn't want you embarrassing yourself any more than you already have." The words hit like a slap. Embarrassing myself. Like I was the one who had stood in the middle of a ballroom and torn down my spouse in front of 100 people. Like I was the one who had accused my partner of infidelity as a punchline. Like I was the problem. And in that moment, something broke. But not the thing Richard wanted to break. No, what broke was my silence. I stepped back out of his reach and I heard my own voice, steady and clear, cutting through the Christmas music like a blade. "Richard, that's enough." The room went still. "You're lying." 3 words. Simple. True. Richard's smile faltered. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. In 7 years of marriage, I had never contradicted him in public. Not once. Not ever. "What did you say?" "I said you're lying. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I am not having an affair with anyone. And my work is not a joke. It's a real business, with real customers and real success that you have been too busy mocking to notice." Silence. Total. Ringing. Silence. I looked around the room at the faces frozen in shock, at Angela with her hand over her mouth, at Matthew whose expression had shifted from fury to something like respect. Then I looked back at Richard. He was pale. The bravado was gone. In its place was something ugly embarrassment curdling into anger. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "No." I shook my head slowly. "You made the scene. I'm just not playing along anymore." I turned and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the marble floor. Every step felt like a declaration. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Behind me, I heard Richard snarl something I couldn't make out. I heard the awkward shuffle of people who didn't know what to do. I heard Angela's voice saying something soft and urgent. But I just kept walking. Through the ballroom, past the Christmas tree, into the elevator, down to the lobby. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until the cold December air hit my face and I could finally breathe again. I made it to the fountain before my legs gave out. It was a decorative thing in the lobby, all marble and softly cascading water, lit from below so it glowed like something from a fairy tale. I sank onto the edge, my red dress pooling around me, and tried to remember how to breathe. The cold was sharp. I had left my coat upstairs. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about anything except getting out of that room before I fell apart. Now, alone in the empty lobby, I let myself feel it. The humiliation, the rage, the betrayal. It all crashed over me at once, and I pressed my hands to my face, refusing to let the tears come. Not here. Not yet. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. I didn't look up until a weight settled on my shoulders, warm, heavy. A coat. Matthew stood in front of me, his face carved with concern. He had followed me out. "Michelle, don't." My voice was hoarse. "Please don't say anything kind right now or I'll fall apart." He nodded slowly. Then he sat down on the fountain edge beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. We sat in silence. The lobby was quiet except for the gentle splash of water. Outside the glass doors, snowflakes fell in slow motion against the city lights. Somewhere upstairs, the party continued laughter and music and champagne, as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry," Matthew said finally. His voice was low, heavy. I should have stopped him sooner. "You couldn't have." I pulled his coat tighter around me. It smelled like wool and sandalwood. "This has been coming for a long time." He didn't argue. He just sat there, steady and present, while I collected the shattered pieces of my dignity. "I'll drive you home," he said after a while. "Your car can stay in the garage overnight." I should have said no. I should have insisted on driving myself, but I was shaking not from cold, from something deeper, and I knew I couldn't be behind a wheel right now. "Okay," I whispered. The drive home was silent. Not awkward silence. Something quieter than that. Matthew kept his eyes on the road. I kept mine on the window, watching the city lights blur past like memories I was leaving behind. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. He didn't make promises. He knew they wouldn't help. He just drove me home through the snow, and when he pulled up to my house, he said only one thing. "What he said about you in there, that's not what anyone thinks. They saw what he is tonight. They all saw." I nodded, unable to speak. I got out of the car, walked to my front door. Didn't look back. Inside, the house was quiet. The babysitter was reading on the couch, Emily long asleep. I paid her, thanked her, locked the door behind her. Then I stood alone in my living room, still wearing Matthew's coat, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. I didn't go to bed. I checked on Emily, first crept into her room and watched her sleep for a long moment, her small chest rising and falling, her face peaceful. She was curled around her stuffed bunny, completely unaware that her mother's world had just cracked open. "I'm building a castle, baby," I whispered. "I promise." Then, I went to the kitchen. The house was dark except for the light over the sink. I sat down at the table, the same table where I had worked so many late nights, the same table where Emily had crawled into my lap and asked about castles, and I pulled out the partnership agreement from where I kept it, hidden in a folder marked recipes. I spread it out in front of me. There it was. Black ink on white paper. Matthew's signature next to mine. Numbers that represented not just money, but belief, faith. Investment in someone Richard had dismissed for years. My little hobby. My cute project. My real, actual, legitimate business that had grown despite every dismissal, every eye roll, every moment Richard had made me feel like I was playing pretend. I ran my fingers over the numbers. Revenue projections, growth metrics, profit margins, all of it documented, all of it real. Richard had tried to humiliate me tonight by mocking this. He had dragged Matthew into it, tried to twist our professional partnership into something dirty. He had stood in front of everyone and announced that my dreams were laughable. But this paper didn't lie. This paper said I was a business owner with a legitimate partner. This paper said strangers across the country bought my work because they thought it was beautiful. This paper said I had built something while he was busy tearing me down. His cruel words couldn't break me, because they weren't true. I sat at that kitchen table until 3 a.m, staring at the contract, feeling something new take root in my chest. Not anger, not revenge, power. The quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are, even when someone spends years trying to convince you you're nothing. Richard was going to walk through that door eventually. He was going to expect tears, apologies. The version of Michelle who shrank and submitted and pretended everything was fine. He wasn't going to find her. Richard came home at 2:47 inches the morning. I heard his car in the driveway, heard the front door open too loud. He was still drunk, or at least careless. Heard him stumble through the living room, bump into something, curse under his breath. I was in bed by then. Not sleeping. Just lying there in the dark. Waiting. He came into the bedroom without turning on the light. I heard him strip off his clothes, drop them on the floor, something he knew I hated, and climb into bed beside me. He didn't say anything. Didn't apologize, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't acknowledge that 2 hours ago he had humiliated me in front of every colleague he had. He just turned over and went to sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. In the darkness, 2 paths spread out before me like roads diverging in a forest. The first path was familiar. I could believe what he said about me. I could accept that my work was cute and my dreams were foolish and my value was measured in how well I supported his career. I could swallow tonight's humiliation the way I had swallowed 100 smaller ones. I could stay small. The second path was terrifying. I could refuse to shrink. I could stop pretending. I could become the woman who had spoken up in that ballroom, the one who said, "That's enough," and meant it. I could build my castle so high that he would have to look up at it. I thought about Emily. I thought about what she would learn from watching me, whether she would grow up believing that love meant tolerance of cruelty, whether she would see her mother disappear into a marriage that demanded silence and submission, Whether she would inherit my shrinking, the way daughters inherit so many things we never mean to pass down. No, not her, not me. I turned my head and looked at Richard's sleeping form, at the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man who had become someone I didn't recognize, and I whispered into the darkness, "This is just the beginning." He didn't hear me. He didn't need to, because the words weren't for him. They were for me. A vow, a declaration, a line drawn in sand that I would never uncross. Underestimating me was his worst mistake, and he was about to find out why. The next morning, Richard acted like nothing had happened. That's the part that still gets me, how completely he erased it. How he came downstairs in his weekend clothes, kissed Emily on the head, poured himself coffee, and scrolled through his phone like the night before had been just another ordinary evening. No apology. No acknowledgement. Nothing. "Good party last night," he said casually, not looking at me. Matt seemed off, though. Wonder what's up with him? I stared at him. He genuinely didn't think he'd done anything wrong. In his mind, he'd made a few jokes, had a few drinks, and now it was Sunday and there was football to watch. The humiliation he'd inflicted was already forgotten, or worse, it had never registered as humiliation at all. I didn't say anything. I just poured my coffee and took Emily to the park. But while Richard was busy pretending, other things were happening, things he couldn't see, because I wasn't the only one who remembered that night. Over the next 2 weeks, my business quietly exploded. A lifestyle blogger with 200,000 followers featured one of my necklaces in her gift guide. Orders tripled overnight. Then a local magazine reached out for an interview. Then a regional boutique chain asked about wholesale arrangements. I handled all of it while Richard was at work, answered emails during Emily's nap time, packed orders after she went to bed, built and built and built, brick by invisible brick. One night, Richard walked through the living room while I was photographing a new collection. "Playing store again?" he asked, not even slowing down. "Something like that," I said. He didn't notice the stack of shipping boxes in the corner. Didn't ask about the new inventory spread across the table. Didn't wonder why I was up past midnight every night. He had decided years ago that my work didn't matter. And once Richard decided something, he didn't reconsider. That was going to cost him. Meanwhile, at his office, something else was shifting. Matthew had been quiet since the party, professionally cordial with Richard, but nothing more. The easy camaraderie they'd once had evaporated. Richard didn't seem to notice at first. He was too busy being Richard. But his colleagues noticed. "Angela texted me a few days after the party. Just wanted you to know people are talking about what happened. Richard isn't coming out of it well." I stared at that message for a long time. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't plotted some elaborate revenge scheme. All I had done was stand up for myself in a moment when I couldn't stay silent anymore. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the truth, spoken once in the right moment, starts a chain reaction you never planned. 3 weeks after the party, Richard came home in a foul mood. "They're reviewing my project," he announced, dropping his briefcase on the counter with more force than necessary. "Matt called a whole department meeting just to pick apart my quarterly numbers." I looked up from the dinner I was preparing. "That doesn't sound good." "It's bullshit is what it is." He loosened his tie, scowling. "I've been carrying that department for years. Now suddenly everyone has opinions?" I didn't say anything, just kept chopping vegetables. And the worst part? He poured himself a drink, whiskey, neat. People are being weird. Like they're walking on eggshells around me. Angela barely makes eye contact anymore. I thought about Angela's text, about the colleagues who had watched Richard humiliate me and said nothing in the moment but who hadn't forgotten. "Maybe you should ask them why," I said carefully. Richard snorted. "Why would I do that? They're the ones acting strange, not me." Of course, it was never him. It was always someone else's fault, someone else's problem, someone else's failure to appreciate his brilliance. I finished dinner in silence. The next week, Angela reached out again. Not a text this time. A phone call. "Michelle, I hope this isn't overstepping." Her voice was hesitant. "But I thought you should know what's happening. Tell me." She took a breath. The night of the party, it didn't just go away. People talked. HR talked. Richard has a reputation now for being, she trailed off, cruel. I finished. Yes, the word came out heavy. The higher-ups are watching him, Matthew especially. Whatever goodwill Richard had built up over the years, it's gone. I sat with that information after we hung up. Part of me felt vindicated, part of me felt sad. The man I married had been kind once, supportive. The transformation into whatever he'd become, it didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly. One dismissal at a time, until cruelty became comfortable. But I couldn't save him from himself. I could only save myself. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cardstock, elegant script. The return address was a gallery I had only dreamed about showing in. I opened it with shaking hands. Dear Miss Taylor, it is our pleasure to invite you to participate in the 5th Annual Metropolitan Artisan Showcase. Your work has been selected for feature in our Emerging Designers exhibit. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. The Metropolitan Artisan Showcase was the kind of event where careers were made, where collectors came with checkbooks, where magazine editors scouted the next big names in handcrafted jewelry. And they wanted me, my work, my designs, my little hobby. I stood in my kitchen, holding that invitation, and I started to cry. Not sad tears. Not this time. These were the tears of someone who had worked in secret for years, who had been mocked and dismissed and told she was dreaming too big, who had built something beautiful while everyone around her insisted it was worthless. I had been seen. By strangers, yes, but more importantly by myself. Mommy? I wiped my eyes quickly. Emily was standing in the doorway, looking concerned. It's okay, baby, come here. She crawled into my lap, and I showed her the invitation. She couldn't read all the words, but she understood the important part. They want your jewelry in a museum? Something like that. A big show where lots of people will see it. Her eyes went wide. Like a castle? I laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. Yeah, baby, exactly like a castle. That afternoon, Emily helped me pick which pieces to submit. She was very serious about it, studying each necklace and bracelet like a tiny curator. She rejected 3 designs as too shiny and approved 4 others with solemn nods. This one, she said finally, holding up a silver pendant with a blue stone. This one is the best because it looks like the sky when it's happy. I hugged her so tight she squeaked. I didn't tell Richard about the invitation. He didn't deserve to know. He would find out eventually when my name was in the program, when the showcase became the story of our friends and neighbors, when he couldn't ignore what I'd built anymore. But until then, this moment, this victory, this proof that I had been right all along. I was building a castle, and it was almost done. The night of the showcase, I wore gold, not the red dress. That belonged to a different woman, one who still hoped Richard might see her. The gold was for me, silk that caught the light when I moved, a statement that said, I belong here without asking permission. Emily had helped me choose it. You look like treasure, Mommy. Treasure. That's exactly what I wanted to feel like. The gallery was everything I had imagined and more. High ceilings with exposed brick. Soft lighting that made every piece of art glow. Well-dressed people moving through the space like this was where they always spent their Friday nights, and for many of them, it probably was. My collection was displayed near the center of the main room. I stopped when I saw it. Stopped completely, in the middle of the flow of people, and just looked. 12 pieces of my jewelry, arranged on white pedestals under perfect lighting, my name on a small brass plaque, Michelle Taylor, Emerging Designer. Each piece caught the gallery lights and threw tiny rainbows across the white walls. My work, my hands, my late nights and secret dreams. Here. Real. Undeniable. Miss Taylor? I turned. A woman with sharp eyes and a press badge extended her hand. I'm Sarah Chen with Artisan Quarterly. I've been following your work online for months. Would you have a few minutes for an interview? Our readers would love to hear your story. My story. For years, my story had been told by someone else, reduced to a hobby, dismissed as cute. Now a journalist was asking to hear it from me. I'd love that, I said. We talked for 15 minutes. Sarah asked about my inspiration, my process, the blue stone pendant that Emily had chosen. She asked what it felt like to be featured here, among artists whose work hung in museums and private collections. Honestly, I said, it feels like proof. Proof that the work was always real, even when I stopped mid-sentence. Because Richard had just walked through the gallery door. He was with a colleague. I vaguely recognized someone from his office, the kind of person who collected invitations to events like this. Richard was laughing at something, looking relaxed, clearly expecting an evening of free wine and networking. Then his eyes found the center display. Then his eyes found my name. The laugh died on his face. Richard moved toward me like a man walking through water, slow, disbelieving, each step an effort. I watched him come. Watched his expression cycle through confusion, shock, and something that looked almost like fear. By the time he reached me, Sarah Chen was still at my side, press badge gleaming. Michelle. His voice was strange, hollow. What is this? Before I could answer, Sarah spoke up. Oh, do you two know each other? Richard's mouth twisted into something that wanted to be a smile. She's my wife. This is her little project. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Little project? She let out a surprised laugh. Mr. Taylor, your wife is the most talked about emerging designer at this showcase. We've had 3 collectors asking about her pieces tonight. Her work is already generating significant attention. Richard's face went pale. I watched it happen, watched him try to process that the woman he'd mocked in front of his entire office was standing in a gallery, being interviewed by press, while industry professionals praised work he'd called worthless. Richard. My voice was calm, steady. I think there's something you should know. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in years. This business, the one you called a hobby, has a partner, an investor who believed in it when you didn't, who saw potential where you saw nothing. His jaw tightened. Who? Matthew Sanders. The name landed like a bomb. Richard's face went through several colors in rapid succession. White, red, a strange grayish purple. Matt? His voice cracked. My Matt? My boss? Your boss, I confirmed. The man you accused me of sleeping with at your Christmas party? He's my business partner. He invested in my little hobby 6 months ago because he believed in what I was building. I paused, letting it sink in. The man you humiliated me in front of the man whose professional reputation you tried to smear has been supporting my work this entire time, while you dismissed me, while you laughed at me, while you told everyone I was playing pretend. Sarah Chen had the good sense to step away, though I noticed she hadn't gone far. Richard stood frozen. His world was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. You had a partner who believed in you all along, Richard, I said quietly. It just wasn't me. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a quiet corner near the emergency exit. What the hell, Michelle? His voice was a furious whisper. You went behind my back? I looked down at his hand on my arm, the same grip from the Christmas party, the same assumption that he could move me wherever he wanted. I pulled free. Behind your back? I kept my voice level. Richard, I didn't go behind your back. I went around you, because you stopped being on my side years ago. That's not... When was the last time you asked about my work? Really asked? When was the last time you looked at something I made and said anything other than cute or nice or that's great, babe, while scrolling through your phone? He opened his mouth, closed it. You don't remember, I said. Because it's been years. You checked out of my dreams a long time ago. Richard, you decided they didn't matter. You decided I didn't matter. I never said that. You didn't have to. You showed me. Every day, every dismissal, every joke, at my expense. Every time you made me feel small so you could feel big. His face contorted. So what, this is revenge? You've been plotting with Matt to humiliate me? No. I shook my head slowly. This isn't revenge. This is me finally being seen by someone. It just happened to be someone you work for. I could lose my job over this. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you publicly accused your boss of sleeping with your wife. He stared at me. And I saw it the moment he realized he had no move left, no angle, no way to spin this into something that made him the victim. "You've changed," he said finally. It sounded like an accusation. "Yes." I met his eyes. "I have. I'm not the woman you humiliated at that party anymore. That woman died that night, Richard, and you killed her." I stepped back. "But you should thank her before she goes, because she's the one who stayed silent for 7 years while you became this." I gestured at him, the designer suit, the expensive watch, the hollow man underneath. "I'm not going to stay silent anymore." I walked back to the showcase. He didn't follow. The HR investigation began 2 weeks later. I wasn't involved, not directly. But Angela called to tell me. 3 people filed complaints about Richard's behavior at the Christmas party, she said. 2 women from accounting who witnessed the whole thing. And Matthew. Matthew filed a complaint? He documented everything, the public accusations, the hostile work environment he created for you, the implications about their relationship. She paused. "Richard's been put on administrative leave pending review." I sat with that information for a long time. This wasn't something I had orchestrated. I hadn't whispered in anyone's ear or pushed for consequences. All I had done was stand up for myself in a moment when silence would have destroyed me. But actions have consequences. Richard's cruelty at that party, the cruelty he thought was just joking, just blowing off steam, had been witnessed by dozens of people. People who remembered. People who talked. People who eventually decided that behavior like that couldn't be overlooked. His career didn't collapse because of me. It collapsed because of him. 2 months later, Richard resigned. It was technically voluntary, the kind of voluntary that happens when the alternative is termination. He took a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement that kept the ugliest details quiet. I found out through Angela, not him. By then, we were already living in separate houses. Emily asked about him on a Sunday morning. We were making pancakes, her standing on a step stool, carefully stirring batter while I supervised. The kitchen was warm with the smell of butter and maple syrup. "Mommy?" Her voice was small. "Is Daddy coming home?" I set down the spatula and knelt to her level. "No, sweetheart, Daddy isn't coming home. He's going to live in his own place now, but you'll still see him every week. He still loves you very much." "Because you're not married anymore?" "That's right." She stirred the batter slowly, thinking, "Is it because he was mean?" My heart cracked a little. "Grown-ups sometimes stop being good partners to each other," I said carefully. "That doesn't mean he's not your daddy. But Mommy needed to build a new kind of life, one where I could be happy." She considered this. Then she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Are you happy now, Mommy?" I thought about it. Really thought. "I'm getting there, baby, more every day." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to stirring. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. No drama. Richard was too focused on rebuilding his own life to fight over details. We split custody of Emily, sold the house, divided the rest. I used my share to expand the business. I hired my first employee, a young woman named Jessica, who handled shipping and customer service while I focused on design. I rented studio space downtown. I launched a new collection that sold out in 6 hours. Matthew remained my business partner. Nothing more. The gossip Richard had tried to start never gained traction. Everyone who knew us knew the truth. We met once a month to review numbers, adjust strategy, plan for growth. "You don't need me anymore," he told me one afternoon, looking at our quarterly projections. "You could buy me out tomorrow." "Maybe," I said, "but you believed in me when no one else did. That's worth keeping." He smiled. "Fair enough." 6 months after the showcase, I sat alone in my studio. It was late past midnight. Emily was at Richard's for the weekend. The space was quiet except for the soft hum of the heating system and the occasional sound of traffic from the street below. I was working on my newest collection. Pieces inspired by transformation butterflies, phoenixes, broken things made whole in new forms. Each one felt like a piece of my own story, translated into silver and stone. On the wall above my workbench, I had pinned a photograph. It was from the Christmas party. Angela had taken it early in the evening, before everything fell apart, me standing by the Christmas tree in my red dress, smiling the practiced smile I had worn for years. Looking at it now, I barely recognized the woman in that picture. She looked trapped, performing, waiting for permission to exist. I wasn't her anymore. I set down my tools and looked around the studio at the orders waiting to ship, the new designs taking shape, the brass plaque I had saved from the showcase that read Michelle Taylor, emerging designer. Richard had tried to expose me that night. He thought he was revealing my weakness, my foolishness, my cute little hobby that would never amount to anything real. But he was right about one thing. He did expose who I am. He just had no idea what he was uncovering. Not a woman playing pretend. Not a wife who needed his validation to feel worthy. Not someone whose dreams were smaller than his opinions. He exposed a builder, a creator, a mother who worked through exhaustion to give her daughter something to be proud of. He exposed someone who builds castles. And here's what I know now, standing on the other side of everything. The people who try to make you small, they're not showing you your limitations. They're showing you theirs. They mock what they don't understand. They dismiss what intimidates them. They tear down what they could never build themselves. Your job isn't to convince them you're worthy. Your job is to build anyway. In the silence. In the secret hours. Brick by invisible brick until one day they have to look up at what you've made and reckon with what they missed. So if you're watching this and you've got a Richard in your life, someone who laughs at your dreams, who calls your work cute, who makes you feel foolish for wanting more, I need you to hear this. You are not foolish. You are not small. You are building something real, even if no one can see it yet. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day you're going to stand in a room full of people who finally recognize what you've built. And the Richards of the world won't be able to touch you anymore, because you'll be too high up for their hands to reach. Keep building. Beautiful. I'll see you in the next story. If this story hit home, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told your dreams were too big, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where all my castle builders are watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Tap that button. Join the family. Because we've got more stories like this, coming stories about people who refuse to stay small. Until next time, keep building, keep believing, and never let anyone tell you what you're worth.